afford billions of dollars a day to rain chaos and cruelty overseas in a war that none of us asked for and none of us wanted, but we cannot afford basic public services like Medicaid. We cannot afford to maintain SNAP benefits at the level that a whole lot of people who are already on the edge need them. So what I would do is I would refuse to vote for any appropriations package that continues to fund this needless war in Iran. What I would do is I would work to repeal the authorization for the use of military force that has been on the books for over 2 decades and that cedes far too much power to the executive branch to drag us in to foreign wars on faraway continents that none of us want, because there are far more important places for us to be spending our money. And right now, what we are living through is the tail end of decades of policy decisions in which every time we have a budget shortfall, be it at the state or the federal level, well, they cut public services. They cut things like our public lands agencies. If it's at the state level, where I got my start in advocacy work back in 2017, what I saw during that budget shortfall is deep cuts to our healthcare services in this state. And over the following 6 years, when we had budget surpluses, do you think that they reinvested that money in rebuilding our mental health system, mental health care system? No. What they did is they invested that money in tax cuts for the richest people in this country, year after year after year, and that is the same story that we are seeing at the federal level, where the biggest priority that the people in control right now could find was the big, beautiful bill, with $3 trillion of tax cuts that went to the highest earners in this country and to cut in the corporate tax rate again. So let's reform our tax system. Let's make sure that nobody making over $1 million a year is paying a lower share of their income than somebody making $80,000 a year and barely getting by in this state. And let's invest that money in housing and healthcare and childcare so that we can all afford to live a good life and maybe have some time to go recreate on our public lands while we're at it.
Ryan? Look, I know if you went to fill up your car today, if you've experienced much of what we've felt in the last 2 years, it can feel pretty dark and hopeless. Affordability, this word that encompasses everything we feel about whether we can afford to live here or not, is not something that just happened to this. This was not a meteor that fell from space. It was not a physical law like gravity. This happened, and here's the hopeful part. This thing that we're experiencing that's making it hard for us to afford to live here, making our fuel prices go up, is a choice that we have made as a country because we put the wrong people in office. We have a Congress now that refuses to stand up to an out-of-control administration. When this administration says we're going to rush off into war, even if we don't have a plan, even though we know Iran will shut down the Strait of Hormuz and it will damage every American citizen and fuel prices will go up, does your representative stand up and say, no, don't do that. I've got a bunch of people in western Montana that's going to hurt? No, he doesn't do that. He claps. You don't have representation, and you deserve representation. When your power bills are going up every day, does your representative stand up and say, look, don't pull the incentives for wind and solar, because wind and solar is the cheapest form of energy. My constituents need cheap energy. They don't need more expensive energy. Does your representative do that? No, he doesn't. He claps. We're here because you deserve representation, because my kids deserve representation, because your kids and your friends and the people who live here and the people who make this community go deserve representation. We don't have to have more expensive gasoline. We don't have to have more expensive electricity. We don't have to make choices that pull the cheapest forms of energy off the grid while we continue to incentivize the most expensive forms of energy. We can make better choices. You should demand that of your representatives. I promise you I will fight for every single one of those things.
Yes? Yeah, I think we could start with more of those stickers that say, I did that, and it's Trump, on the gas pump that we see. That'd be a good start. That's what they did to Biden, and it swayed so many people's opinion. But I tell you what, this is unlike that situation. This is not an OPEC issue. This truly is one man that is driving the cost for all of us. The overreach of executive power, of presidential power, is truly the problem in many of these cases that we see, and probably many of the things that we'll talk about tonight. And so that is what we have to focus on. But really the core issue in this country that we don't talk about enough, and I know we have representatives here collecting signatures to start fighting this, is money in politics. When we look at the overwhelming power that our petroleum industry has on Capitol Hill, that is the reason we get into these situations. Because I can tell you who's not doing bad right now simply based off of supply and demand are companies like BP, are companies like ConocoPhillips. They're doing fine because the price per barrel is through the roof. But you and I are paying more at the pump, and we can't afford it. We are getting stretched on energy costs, on housing costs, on healthcare costs, on childcare costs. We can go down the list. And yet so many people in this state voted because they wanted lower cost of gasoline. They wanted to stop being the country of forever wars. And where are we now? This is an opportunity. And I can tell you this is one of the biggest areas where we see a bridge to help move people into this tent to say, you've been fooled, and it's okay, but it's time to come back and start fixing these issues. So when we talk about specific items, we need to limit that executive overreach. We need to reel in that power and push those decisions back to Congress. We need to cut money out of politics once and for all so that corporations no longer control our political system. And it starts right here in Montana with programs like the Montana Plan, and it starts with people like me who are individual contributions only because I'm not beholden to these corporations. That's how we make change on day one, starting in 2027 when I take office. Thank you.
Matt?
So lots to cover in this question. To start with the war, we all saw this coming. And so, I've served in Iraq, and tactically, operational, strategically, this was a horrible idea in how it was executed. We knew that this was coming down the pipeline. And so that is, this administration, this is why we have to flip this seat. The urgency has never been greater. We have to put checks and balances so this doesn't happen, and we can make sure that Congress takes back the power to declare war. On top of that, Montana's ranchers and farmers. I just wrote my check for fertilizer for the hayfield. It sucked. $130 to fill up my truck to come here and bitch and complain about what's going on out there. It sucks. We can do way better. There is not a product that you're going to go to the store and buy or get delivered to your house that isn't touched by fuel. Inflation is going to hit us hard here shortly. And we're going to feel it. And this administration is going to play games. And they're going to try to win their votes and buy their votes going into November. We have to focus and make sure that we flip this. Ranchers and farmers, local Montanans are going out. They're firing up their tractors to start haying, seeding out there. They are feeling the pain right now. That's hitting their bottom line. Before they've even started, their profit margins on their operations for the year are already down probably 10%. They changed their whole operations because of that. That means that we have an opportunity right now. As Democrats, we can take this and we can present to them and give them somebody that they can pivot to. Ranchers and farmers, doesn't matter where on the political spectrum they are, they know that when their operations are under attack, they're ready for something different. So this is our opportunity. Let's get out there and let's bring them back to the party. Democrats made rural Montana. It's time to remind them of that.
We're not spending any of that money, any of the $191 billion. We're told that we can't push these various buttons that I'm about ready to describe on housing, and that's wrong. We can make better choices. None of these things are going to solve it, but why don't we have stronger, more aggressive first-time homebuyer assistance? Why don't we have a federal program that guarantees low interest payments? Why don't we have more federal assistance for building out infrastructure for new affordable housing units? Because many times what slows down the building and adding of units in a place like Bozeman is the fact that water and sewer is not there, and the developers can't afford to do it, and they can't wait on that. There are a few programs through ARPA, through the Biden administration that did that, and you're going to see the payoff here in the next year or so in Bozeman with units that are 150, 180, 190 units. We could be doing more of that. We don't have to spend $1.6 billion a day on a war in Iran. We could be pushing more of these buttons. I have dedicated myself in this campaign to never once voting for, advocating for, speaking for, or doing anything to assist any program that pushes wealth further upward. What I'm talking about here with these housing programs you deserve, the people of Montana deserve. We should be always, and I will always push the wealth and the money back to the working people where it needs to be. And in housing, it's one of our biggest problems. You don't have to go around the district more than 5 minutes to hear that housing is a humongous problem. When we're less affordable than the state of California, that's a problem. Let's make better decisions.
Russ?
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road for me. So, look, the only reason I was able to buy my first home as a veteran was because the VA loans are no money down. It was zero money down to get into a home and start accruing equity. The only reason my employees, my 200 employees when I was running Rocky Mountain Kids, were able to afford their cost of living and their housing was because I paid them 30% more than my competition. The only reason teachers in my community, when I moved home, were able to find housing and that the school was able to actually recruit teachers was because we built affordable housing, a sevenplex that was dedicated to teacher housing. Look, this is not a one-stop shop solution, but I can tell you the things that we need to focus on are, number one, wages. We haven't seen wages increase in this country for nearly 50 years in line with inflation and productivity. That's the start. I propose a 50-to-1 cap on executive to frontline worker wages so that people, the working class that's creating that productivity, actually starts making a livable wage. If we would have stayed in line with that since 1968, the federal minimum wage would be $25 an hour right now. But we can't turn that on overnight because we will cripple small businesses across this state. We also need to get these tariffs out of here that are driving up the cost of lumber costs that are largely imported from places like Canada. That's another thing. I worked in lending for over a decade. There's massive lending reform we can do to get more people into homes with no money down. The average cost of a home in Montana is over $600,000 right now, and I can tell you with a 20% down payment, you're boxing most people out with a down payment of $120,000 just to get considered for a loan. And by easing the burden on that home buying market, you also ease the burden on the rental market as well. These are real solutions that we can do if we have a Congress and a representative from Montana who actually understands how these systems work and who has done the work themselves. And I've done it in wages, I've done it in home building myself with my own hands, and I've done it on the lending side as well. We can fix this issue in places like Bozeman, and with your help, I can get there. Thank you.
Matt?
So I recently got asked to tell some people what's something about the district nobody knows. You know, you want to be like, oh, it's the most beautiful district in the country. But the truth is, and I told them, like, we weren't ready for COVID. The influx of people rapidly coming into a place that, you know, had been too hard to get to, too far away. They suddenly realized Montana was gorgeous, and we weren't ready. So the housing question. First of all, we have to find ways federally to fund buildup of our infrastructure. Pandora's box is open. People are going to keep coming here. We're not going to stop that. We have to expand. We have to build the roads, the electric, the septic, the wells, the water, as needed to build more supply out there. And then that supply has to come to the low-income and middle-income type houses, single-family homes. So a young family that wants to move into the area, raise some kids, those type of houses. Contractors. We have to find incentives through the tax system to make sure that contractors don't go cherry pick the mansions, that they start building homes for us. And then I own some rental properties. When I was in the military, I'd buy a house, I'd PCS, I'd rent it out. It's tailored against somebody having a second home. We need to find solutions because right now, corporations don't care. They've bought up a whole crap load of our houses and they're Airbnb them out there. That's hurting us. That is falsely inflating how much we want or need to go pay for a house. We want to just like move down the road from our family. We need to get corporations out of Montana. We need to put Montana names on Montana mortgages. We can do that. That will help bring the home prices back down to where they actually should be without that inflated false appreciation that those corporations are putting in there. Thank you.
Dem?
Yeah, so we are in a housing crisis right now, and it is worse than it has ever been in recent memory, but it is not new. Lots of folks, not just in the last 6 months, since affordability became the watchword for politicians across the country, but for the last 5 or 10 years, most of the folks I know, anytime I go to a bar, we're talking about the fact that our rent has doubled or tripled or worse in the last 5 or 10 years. Anytime I'm hanging out with friends, we're talking about the fact that, well, there's a whole lot of people in a whole generation in this state who cannot conceive of ever owning a home because of how quickly property values have risen in places where people have been born and raised and spent their whole lives. And so what do we do when we're in a crisis? We need to pull every lever that we can so that folks in that generation, people who are at this point losing faith in whether government can actually address a crisis, can have that faith and have hope again. And the 3 levers that we can pull when it comes to fixing a housing market that is broken are supply, subsidy, and stability. When it comes to supply, we need to make investments upstream and make sure that there are more apprenticeship slots available for people who are ready to go into the trades and should not have to wait or pay money to make sure that they are getting trained up to be the folks we need building those houses. When it comes to subsidy, we should look to the models that work. We have programs like the Community Development Block Grant, where we built affordable housing for decades as a country and in which we have not increased investment in decades. That is a problem. If we can afford $3 trillion in tax cuts for the richest people in this country, and for large corporations, we can afford to repeal those and invest some of that money in programs like that. And lastly, it's stability. And when I'm sitting down with Debbie, not so far from here over at King Arthur Mobile Home Park, whose lot rent has nearly doubled in the last 5 years, and Debbie tells me, Sam, when I was your age, if old folks had to live like this, I would be so angry. We should be so angry. And being angry is not enough. We need a policy solution. And the policy solution is to say that private equity firms, 23 of which now own over 1,800 mobile home parks across this country, should not be allowed to buy up the last affordable housing option that a lot of people like Debbie have. Let's ban large corporations from owning residential homes. Let's ban private equity from buying up our mobile home parks. And let's get them out of the housing market.
Okay, Russ, you'll get this next question. It has to do with healthcare.
Our healthcare system is under increasing pressure from massive government cuts to critical safety net programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and Obamacare in general. Furthermore, the rising costs of medical insurance and the cost of medical care and hospital benefits is placing quality healthcare financially out of reach of many folks. What are your specific proposals for making healthcare more affordable?
Yeah, great question. That's what I'm supporting. I'm the dad who sat in that hospital room while his little girl was undergoing leukemia treatment, and these insurance companies that I paid for with the best insurance I could find as a small business owner were sending me $300,000 bills for a month of leukemia treatment for my daughter. While she was fighting for her life for 8 months, we continued to receive those bills until the very end. Madison lost her battle with leukemia, and that's what brought us home to Montana. We realized we need to slow down and be close to family and appreciate the life that Montana offers for many families. But just a year after moving home, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with a different rare lung disease called pulmonary capillaritis, where your lungs slowly bleed out. There's only one medication that can fix it. Any guesses on whether insurance covered that medication? No, they did not. It took us 18 months of fighting that insurance company to get that added to their register. Meanwhile, they had an allergist in some back room that was trying to go against the only pulmonologist in 6 states that knew how to treat this rare disease. That dose of medicine that she needed every 3 to 4 weeks cost $10,000 for a medication that just costs a few $100s to make. We should not accept having our medical system in this country be part of Wall Street. We should not have our medical system in this country continue to drive profits that push families underwater, resulting in a 60% bankruptcy that is medically related in this country. I'm not okay with that. 80% of Americans are not okay with that. Mexico just passed universal health care. We can do it too. But we have to get money out of politics. We have to start representing families the way they deserve. And healthcare is a human right. It is not a Wall Street business, and it's about time we start treating it like that.
Matt.
So, first and foremost with this one, like when I get to Congress, we have to get the ACA subsidies funded. That is the biggest hit to Montanans right now in this state, and that's my priority. I'm not going there to solve the world's problems. I'm going there to take care of Montanans today. 1 in 4 Montanans in our rural communities rely on those subsidies, and they've taken a $500 to $1,000 hit. They get nothing more for it. It's like a new car payment. We have to get that funded. And then what the big beautiful bill did to us, the attack on our rural healthcare system. I mean, I live 45 minutes from an emergency room. I know a lot of people that are an hour and a half, any direction they go. We have to fund our healthcare system, not just like put Band-Aids on it, not just give it telehealth. We need to expand our system so Montanans can easily get to a facility and get quality treatment. And then, again, the big beautiful bill, the attack on Medicaid, pisses me off. They're basically taking $5 from Peter and paying Paul 1. And wherever that $4 in the middle, this administration just took it and ran. They have stopped paying Medicaid perpetually. And what they're doing is they're giving Montana $230 million that has to be spent by October. Why October? Well, it's right before the elections. All these hospitals are going to get new equipment, new things, just little like splurges that doesn't really matter to them, but they're going to spend the money they have to spend. And Republicans are going to pat themselves on the back all the way to the election days. We have to stop that. We have to flip the seat, get in there, and make sure that our healthcare system for Montanans. I mean, shit, when I was a kid, I got doctored out of the vet bag. My parents were too scared to go to the hospital, and we're headed right back there. We can do way better than that. We have to take care of us here first. Our delegation doesn't give a damn about us. We need somebody in there that will put Montanans first.
Dan?
How do we fix healthcare? Well, we start by just acknowledging the truth that our healthcare system is broken. That if I tear my calf on a wildfire and limp off 3 days later and go to the only orthopedist in town just to learn that I'm out of network, so I'm still paying for that out of pocket despite paying my monthly premiums, that is not a functioning healthcare system. That if I'm talking to a gal in Libby who is paying $38,000 a year for her healthcare because she owns a small business and doesn't qualify for the marketplace plans, she knows that that is a broken healthcare system. And how do we fix a broken system? We look at the part of our system that works, it's Medicare in large part. And we plug up the gaps in Medicare because vision and dental and hearing are part of real comprehensive healthcare coverage. And we give everybody in this country, regardless of age, the choice to join Medicare. And if we can do that, if we can build and expand subsidies so that is free healthcare for every single working person in this country, I would offer you that not a whole lot of people like me are going to decide to stay on United Health Insurance's plan because it ain't working. And if the private health insurance corporations have got a plan that they think can outcompete Medicare, well, I would love to know where they've been keeping it for the last 30 years because I have not seen it. That is how we fix healthcare. And more broadly, we need to make sure that the providers on the ground, rural hospitals, can actually stay in business serving people who are covered under Medicare or Medicaid. We need to raise those reimbursement rates so that they're not taking a loss. And we need to make serious investments to rebuild our country's mental health care system because over the last 10 years, I've been working between fire seasons, doing organizing and advocacy. And one of the groups I worked with was the Montana Coalition to Solve Homelessness that we built with the HRDC here in town and a dozen other shelters. And if you go to any shelter across the state, about a third of the folks there are grappling with mental illness for which they have no access to services. That is a policy decision. And it is a policy decision that leaves all of us paying so much more for the least effective, least compassionate solutions when folks' only option is to show up at the shelter or to end up in the state hospital and to be discharged behind the shelter in Butte. We can do so much better than that as a country. We have the resources. Let's spend them where we need them.
Ryan?
But you deserve a representative who is going to look in the eye and tell you what has to be done. And on healthcare, we've got two problems. The first one is short-term, and we've got to plug, first, these Medicaid cuts, work requirements coming down the line. It's an immoral thing that we're doing to our state. We're kicking kids off of healthcare. A lot of Native American kids, elderly people. People are going to die because we have reduced our Medicaid coverage. We haven't, but our Congress has. It's an immoral thing that we're doing, why we're giving tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. We've also cut back on our ACA tax credits. More than 77,000 Montanans rely on the ACA. Those two things, the second your new representative, who's up here on this stage today, the first thing they have to do when they get to Washington, D.C. is fix those two short-term things. Because without it, Montanans are going to die and rural hospitals are going to go out of business. Simple as that. The second thing that has to happen is you deserve a representative, and I think the Democratic Party needs to focus on somebody who will attack big things. I'm running hard on universal health care. We are 50 years behind the curve in this country. Okay? We're the only, I was just at an event in Drummond. Guy there, he's a logger, he told me a cat fell over, a truck kicked a caterpillar, kicked a tree over, fell over on his legs, broke both of his legs. All the way on the life flight, he was worried about whether that was the last time he was ever going to see his ranch because of medical bankruptcy. We're the only country, the only industrialized country in the world who has people that worry about that. That's wrong. But to fix it, it's not just Republicans we got to get out of the way. There are way too many Democrats with their hands in the pocket of big health insurance that make $74 million a year. Okay? And if you want to fix this, you need to elect a Democrat that's not afraid to nudge other Democrats out of the way. You deserve better, and it's time for Democrats to stop talking about this and start delivering. One of the reasons we have Donald Trump is because this hasn't happened. We can do better, and Democrats have to stand up and do better.
So the first question is related to the Iranian war, and Sam, you'll be the first to answer this. The Iranian war. Frankly, this is an issue I didn't think we would be worried about this election cycle, but here we are. And just as a side note, as I was driving in here, I got a news flash on my phone that said we're striking Iran again. So the bombs and missiles and everything are sort of flying again. Without the consent of Congress or approval of the American people, Trump has unilaterally plunged us into another costly Middle Eastern war, the financial and economic impacts of which are not only currently devastating, but will surely last long past this election cycle. The question to you, Sam, is, are you prepared to tighten the purse strings on this war and to rein in Trump's abuse of war powers and support diplomacy to end this war?
Absolutely. Right now, it is not a new story. It is an old story that is just on overdrive, like so much of what we're talking about here. We as a country are all too happy to shower wealth on armaments and chaos and cruelty overseas while people are living in poverty, while record numbers of people are living in the backs of their trucks or in trailers right here in Bozeman and across western Montana. That is shameful, and that is far from the wise investment of our resources that we deserve from our leaders in Congress. So as I said at the beginning, I would refuse to vote for any appropriations package that continues to fund this needless war in Iran. And while we're at it, let's make sure that any money that we are sending overseas for things like military aid have strict humanitarian conditions attached to them, because we have better things to spend our money on than bombing foreign countries, whether it is a war that we are starting in Iran or whether it is trying to enact regime change in South America. This is not how we make ourselves richer. This is not how we make ourselves safer. And you know, what got me into this race in large part was living through the Doge cuts in which the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, was put in charge of some levers of power and used those to squeeze poor and working people, to squeeze our public services, the few that we still had access to, for a little bit more so they could squeeze a bit more profit out of all of us. And while he was doing that to the Forest Service, you know what federal agency took the worst cuts in terms of staffing reductions? It was the VA. And we should not be spending a penny overseas on new wars until we have made sure that we are doing right by the people that we have asked to do their duty overseas in the wars of the past. We are failing at that. And the broader story here, it was not just attacks on the VA, it was not just attacks on our public lands agencies. They completely got rid of one of the best investments on our dollar in terms of saving lives and helping poor people, not just here, but across the world, when they eliminated USAID. That is shameful. If we want to talk about foreign investments that can actually make us safer as a country, it is not just this hard power. It is not just dropping bombs on a country so that we all end up paying more at the gas pump. It is actually exercising our soft power. It is actually exercising a wise foreign policy in which we know and understand that sometimes the compassionate solution is also the most cost-effective solution. Sometimes making sure that people are not going hungry in a faraway country is the way that we make sure we don't end up paying a whole lot more down the line. We are failing at that as a country, and we deserve a Congress that is willing to fight for that. That is what I would like to do as your congressperson.
Before you start, Ryan, and the rest of you, I forgot to start the clock for Sam. So Sam, you got a little extra there, so I'll pass it on to each of you. Okay.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yes, of course, we have to rein in this out-of-control present administration. Look, it goes bigger than just the war, and we'll get to the war in just a second, but if you spend half your time spending all your money on hammers, eventually you're going to find a nail, and we have an out-of-control military-industrial complex on which we spend way too much money, okay? They just requested a $1.5 trillion defense budget. While we're in the middle of this unjustified, dangerous war that's costing us $1.6 billion a day, it's not like Trump wasn't told this is going to drive your fuel prices up. He was told this because every other president has been told this, and yet he did it. And do any of your representatives stand up and say anything about it? No, they don't. That should anger you. It really should. So yes, we have to rein in this president with war powers. We have to rein in the out-of-control spending on our military budget, because we are spending too much money on hammers, and eventually we do find nails. We've done it time. We did it in Iraq. We're doing it here. We spent too much time in Afghanistan. I'm happy that we have a competent, amazing military force who can defend us, but it should be about defending us. This idea that they have changed it to again, it's tough for me to say these things because it's almost that they're a joke, but they're not a joke. The Department of War, come on. This is the Department of Defense. And if we really want to fix America, we really want power overseas, we really want to be respected, it's not because we run over there and flex all of our military equipment. It's because we should do what we've done for the previous 75 years. We take care of ourselves here. We don't gut voting rights here. We don't gut our own economy here. We don't gut our democracy here and then act like a wartime effort is going to get us respect overseas. We don't shred USAID. We don't laugh at soft power. We demand better of ourselves, just like Democrats should do. As a country, we should demand better of ourselves and not take this easy way out, just going over and flexing our muscle and spending money on the military. It's going to lead to dangerous things, and it's costing all of us here at home.
Russ?
Yeah, there's a really sobering part of this conflict that I think we as Americans in this 24/7 news cycle, we digest and we move on, but in the early days of this conflict, we dropped a bomb on a school. We killed over 150 children. Every single one of us in this audience should be irate, should be disgusted, should demand better. As a veteran, I do. I am pro-defense, but I am anti-war. I am tired of forever wars in this country that go on, that are largely driven by petroleum interests and power on a global scale, that are driven by money and corporations, and not actually keeping peace as a true global power should do. Isn't that what we should demand? Yes. Programs like USAID, they're soft power. We don't need to spend $2 billion a day in Iran. especially at the expense of you and I, our friends, our neighbors, our families. 77,000 Montanans at risk of being cut from Medicaid and Medicare. Rural hospitals being slashed out of our networks. Heat costs on the rise by 39% over the last 3 years. Education that drowns people in student debt for decades. Small businesses under collapse because we give corporations free rein. This is the reality of the new America. That's not the country that I fought to defend. We should demand better. And it starts by holding those in charge accountable. President Trump is out of his mind. There's mental cognitive tests that need to be done on a regular basis for anyone who has the authority to put boots on the ground or missiles in the air, period. And finally, this $1 trillion budget far exceeds any amount of money that we should ever spend on defense. It eclipses the next lowest country by 4 times, China. And we want to raise it to $1.5 trillion? Are you kidding me? Imagine what we could do with that $500 billion in this country. Imagine what we could do with $750 billion or $1 trillion. The cost of universal health care in this country is $1.3 trillion. And not a single person would have to pay a dime into that, yet we spend it on dropping bombs on other countries. I say no more, and with your help, we can turn the tides and stop being the country that's been in conflict for 93% of our existence, and I think it can start this election.
Matt?
So this is a question that, it hits me hard because I've been there. Not many people have. We have a lot of soldiers been to war zones. That's amazing. I respect that. I did my time. I was in Iraq for a year. I've deployed. I know what it's like every day feeling like it could be the end. Mortars going off. I've worked at the tactical level with the units at the battalion, and then I was up at division as a liaison officer. I understand the ramifications of the decisions that go on over there. I understand the ramifications of the shit show that's going on that we did in Iran and how it was not planned in any way, shape, or form. From experience. We talked about USAID. I've been there. I've seen the faces of the kids in Africa that are receiving that aid. I know the impacts of it. I've been in the slums of Kibera in Kenya, 1 million people in 1 square kilometer. I've seen a small school of girls that were trying to get out of those slums and the effects of the support the United States has given. It's personal to me. I've been in Afghanistan, doing more projects, up in the mountains, working in areas that they had to do a 5-year project. NGOs up there building agriculture in the top of a mountain for a tribe so they didn't have to travel 2 days by donkey to get to a market. This is the question that really, really affects me. I gave 4 years of my life because I give a damn about every aspect of this. The war, the atrocities, having lost friends. My West Point team leader, he died in Iraq, IED. This atrocity in Iran, and the thing is this has happened. We've got 2 more years of this. We don't know what's coming down the pipeline. That's what scares me. And that is why we absolutely need people in Congress that understand the ramifications and can stand up before this shit happens, can get in front of it because they know firsthand the consequences. So, yeah, this is important, but we're in this for the future. And the future is going to get ugly if we don't have people that know how this plays out.
So how do you propose to get control of this huge national debt and force this country to live within its means?
Yeah. 2 ways, you've got supply, which is taxation, income, and we have We have largely an income system and a wealth disparity system in this country that's immoral. Many of the billionaires pay an effective rate. We have about almost 1,000 billionaires in this country now. Many of them essentially operate on passive income. They pay no income tax. There are all sorts of loopholes for wealthy people like hedge fund managers who make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, who utilize this little trick that their lobbyists got in the system for them called a carried interest loophole. They pay a flat 10% tax on their income. I would hazard a guess to say there's nobody in this audience that pays none or a flat 10% on their income. My point here is that we have an immoral taxation system that must be remedied so that everybody pays their fair share in this country. Elon Musk and all the other billionaires, they have the same cap on their Social Security contributions as all of you do. Elon Musk takes almost everybody in Montana all year. In fact, most people never get to that $180,000 cap. Elon Musk hits it in about 5 seconds of January 1. That's a moral thing that's there because of lobbyists who have put that in the system. Then we have to trim. So we have the supply side that we can do a lot better, and we must trim wasteful expense where we can. And Democrats need to lead the charge on this. We can't just always argue for more government. We should argue for better, more efficient government. Not like DOGE. There was efficiency in the DOGE moniker. That wasn't about efficiency. That was about terrorizing your tool, government. We should demand better government. And healthcare is a really good place to start. We're spending twice as much money per capita on each person in the country on healthcare and getting far worse results. That's an inefficient system. Much of our healthcare expense is spent through the government, through Medicare, Medicaid, an inefficient system. So there are many, many ways that we can make our country more efficient and our spending more efficient. But it's going to take somebody brave, somebody willing to buck the system, somebody willing to nudge other Democrats to do it, and somebody willing to challenge the wealth disparity in this country. And it has to happen. It has to happen now, yesterday, if not sooner. So I'm dedicated to doing that. And I know you screwed up the time there, Mike, so I'm not going to take up the whole next minute.
You're just too young to observe. Russ?
Yeah, I can tell you, almost 10 years in finance, managing a budget that was nearly $500 million, this was something I have direct experience in. And it's important in this moment because we're accruing nearly $1 trillion in debt every 3 to 4 months in this country. Our debt service, like was mentioned, we're paying over $1 trillion in interest just to service the $39 trillion that we have in debt. We haven't seen a positive deficit since the Clinton administration. And so the debt load that we're going to hand down to my kids' generation and their generation is going to be into the 60, 80, $100 trillion. And we are already insolvent as a country. That means our debts outweigh our assets. So as a homeowner, as a car owner, whatever you might be in this audience, imagine that if you owed $500,000 on a home that was only worth $300,000, do you think the bank would keep giving you money? No, they would laugh in your face. It's time to start addressing the issue. And there's some key areas we need to do that we have not done right in over 50 years. The first is, can we please start taxing the billionaires appropriately? Just a 5% wealth tax on those 989 folks would absolutely move the needle in the other direction and would allow us to pay for things like universal health care and universal child care. We also need a stock trading tax. A 0.1% tax would also create hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue a year for a 0.1% day trading tax for those folks that are moving the needle on Wall Street, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. We also need to hold our corporations accountable. The top 86 corporations in this country last year, you want to know how much they paid in corporate tax? 0. Less than any of you in this audience. The system is rigged. We live in a corporatocracy. And it's time to move the needle back. It's time to start paying our debts. And it's time to hold ourselves accountable to those debts and start taxing people fairly, especially at the top.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that for years and years and years, we've heard the Republicans say that Democrats just want to get them to spend their money, right? I mean, pretty sure everyone in here would raise their hand and vote for fiscal responsibility from our government. That is absolutely where we stand. What this administration is doing, they are writing checks. I mean, we're at trillions of dollars, and the big beautiful bill, I mean, they blew right by it. Didn't hear so much about fiscal responsibility with it. And we talk about national security. I mean, they're all worked up over the Sheep Creek mine and how, you know, the nation needs to get in there and start mining. What about the interest on our national debt? To me, that's the biggest national security issue we have out there. We are selling our soul to other countries that are just collecting that up. China, holding vast majority of our debt. That is a national security issue that we have to get under control. And the way that this administration, I mean, Trump's bankrupt about every business that he's ever had. Kind of seems like he's going for the United States next. We have to get back in there and put a checks and balance. And then we have to start putting the investments in the right direction, our infrastructure. There's so much lacking, and right now, this administration just wants to get on Fox News and have their interviews, and that's where the big splashes come from, and that's when they spend money, and they have their war, and they get out there, and that shit has to stop. We have to get back to the boring essentials of government. You get in there, you get elected, you close the goddamn door, and you get to work. That's the rancher in me. That's what I'm offering here, because we have so many needs. We absolutely have so many needs in this nation, in Montana right now. And we just need somebody who will prioritize the right job for the people, spend a lot less time doing interviews and a lot more time getting down and getting work done. Thank you.
So just about as important as what we are spending our money on as a country is where that money comes from. Because we have urgent needs when people are struggling to afford housing and healthcare and childcare, when we are looking at a 2/3 staffing reduction in some of our public lands agencies. And we have an urgent need to get at the obscene concentration of wealth and power in this country. Not just in this country, in Congress itself. Right now, if you're one of the top 400 earners in this country, you are paying an effective income tax rate of 4%, sometimes as low as 0. And when I was working as a smoke jumper, 36% of every paycheck went to taxes and all the rest. And taxes serve two purposes. They generate the revenue that we need to pay for these programs, and also they help make sure that we are moving wealth in the direction that it needs to move. So I agree with Russ, we need a 5% tax on wealth over $1 billion because it does not serve the public interest. To have individuals like Elon Musk who are sitting on obscene amounts of wealth and then turning around and using that wealth to try and buy up our elections. We need a minimum effective income tax rate of 30% on all kinds of income. And when I say all kinds of income over $1 million, that means getting rid of the capital gains loophole. That means taxing unrealized gains. That means it does not matter where your income comes from. You should not be paying a lower tax rate if you get it from the stock market than if you're getting it from wages that you are earning, working day in and day out. That is common sense. That is good governance. That is how we get the resources that we need to pay for these programs without going further into debt and borrowing on future generations. We have accepted a Congress that is all too willing to do that for far too long. And if we want to make sure that we are solving this problem, we also need to get people to Congress who know what it is like to be on the wrong side of that system, because today, the average congressperson is worth about 15 times more than the average American. Do you want to know why there's a lack of urgency at addressing that obscene disparity of income and wealth in this country? It's because the people who are sitting in the halls of power, far too few of them, know what it is like to be on the wrong end of a broken system of taxation or housing or healthcare or childcare, and you can bet your tail I will fight like hell to fix that, because I know what that is like.
Well, gentlemen, I have more questions, but we've run out of time because you need some time to make a closing statement.